Hello, it's Mark from Remarkable Speaking. I'm here with Mr. Bernie Pawlik, Pawlik Automotive in Vancouver, Vancouver's best auto service experience. And we're talking cars. How you doing, Bernie?
Doing good. Doing good.
Today's victim is a 2010 Subaru Outback that had a cooling issue. What was going on with this vehicle?
Yeah, so this vehicle came to our shop with a few concerns. Actually, it actually didn't have a cooling issue. So we did replace the radiator, but it actually came to our shop with a couple of concerns that there were some noises or some feel. The vehicle didn't quite feel right while driving it at higher speeds. And when the owner had some tire changeover done, they noticed that there's a transmission fluid leak. And this is a regular client of ours. We'd done a transmission service a while back. They said there was a transmission fluid leak. They didn't say where from, but I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe the pan gasket's leaking because once in a blue moon, that kind of thing happens. So we basically, had a couple of concerns we're looking at on the vehicle, but transmission fluid leak was one of them.
So what testing and diagnosis did you do on the car?
Yeah, so for the suspension issue, a good long road test was done. And I won't get too much into the details other than we found a couple of bad wheel bearings on the vehicle, which is not uncommon for Subarus. Rear wheel bearings, they seem to go quite frequently. And I could have done a podcast on that. We could be doing the one, but I think we've already probably done one or two on them. If not, we can do one in the future. But anyways, that was one of the concerns. And then, of course, part of that is to bring the vehicle back into the shop, do a hoist inspection, and had a look for the transmission leak and found it was actually leaking from the radiator. Every vehicle with an automatic transmission has a cooler. The fluid has to be cooled and kept at a proper temperature so the transmission doesn't overheat. And the cooler had a leak. So that's what we found. And fortunately, I hate having to do a job twice. The transmission pan seal that we did was impeccably good, which always makes me happy, as it should be. But sometimes things have issues. We can start with some pictures.
So where is the transmission radiator on a Subaru?
Well, it's basically right in. So the transmission radiator is actually inside the cooling system radiator. And you know what? I'll actually change to a different picture here. This is the leak right here. This is the complete radiator here lying on the ground. This is the old one. So this silvery part here, which is all aluminum, this is the radiator core. And this is where all the cooling system heat exchange happens between the cooling system and the outside air. There are fans that bolt up here. You can see a couple of bolts on the top. There are two fans for the radiator that sit up here. And of course, as you're driving, it forces air through the radiator, or the fans will kick on and suck air in there if you're sitting at a light and idling and it needs more airflow. The cooling system hoses, one goes here. That's the upper outlet. And then the lower outlet is down here. These pipes here are where the transmission cooler flows. And inside the bottom of this tank here, that's what these ends are, the upper tank, lower tank. Inside here is another heat exchanger, and that transfers the heat of the transmission into the coolant of the engine. So the radiator actually is multi-purpose. It actually cools the engine. It also keeps the transmission at operating temperature. So these pipes here, they are fitted in, and we'll look at some closer shots here. Basically, it was leaking from this pipe here. And there's another close-up view. You can see it's moist with fluid. I also noticed, too, that actually there's a slight, we didn't really notice any cooling leaking, but you can see a slight trace of, it's like a sort of a whitish look. I'd say that would be the radiator that's actually starting to just very barely seep coolant. Not even a drip, but there's some that has come out over time. So this seal in the radiator between the core and the tank is breaking down. So, a good time to change the radiator. And here's the radiator in the vehicle where we found the coolant leak in the first place. You can see that reddish fluid right there. That's the fluid leak, and it did, left some fluid leaking down on the cross member.
How difficult a job is this replacing this radiator?
It's not very difficult on a Subaru. Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward in and out type of replacement, as opposed to a lot of other vehicles I can think of where it's, many hours worth of work. This is not too difficult. It's fairly straightforward.
And is this a fairly common issue with Subarus, or is this, you work on a lot of them? Is this something you've seen before?
Can't think of any other time we've actually had a transmission cooler fitting leak like this in a Subaru. We see them from time to time in other cars. It's, of all the radiators we replace, it's probably about 5% of the time we replace a radiator because of this.
So I guess you flush the cooling system when you're replacing the radiator?
Well, normally we would, but in the case of this vehicle, we didn't, because at least within the last year, we did the head gaskets on this vehicle and flushed the cooling system back then. So we did put new antifreeze in it. It gets contaminated once you drain it out. But yeah, we basically didn't flush the cooling system. There was no need to, because the antifreeze and coolant that was left in there was still good and fresh and in good condition. We just topped it up with new coolant.
So how did the car run after the repair?
That was good. Yeah, it ran really well. And we did wheel bearings and a couple other issues, so it was nice and quiet driving down the road. But, of course, with this issue with the transmission cooler, you wouldn't really notice a problem until you would actually run the fluid so low in the transmission, it would start to miss shift. But the fluid level wasn't really appreciably low at all. It probably lost maybe a quarter of a liter of fluid. So the owner caught this at the right time. It was a good time to change it. When you find fluid leaks like that, the best thing to do is fix them before they become problematic.
Because you might ruin the whole transmission.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm always, concerned for people's budgets because you never know how, sometimes you can have a fluid leak and it's like, well, you know what? It's so expensive to fix it. Maybe you're better to top the fluid up. But, the thing that's always in the back of my mind is when does a fluid leak go from being a seep to a gusher, because that's when your car is going to be unreliable. And, something like this probably isn't going to go into being a gusher. It'll probably be something that'll just drip worse. And then when you notice that, it's like, okay, this is the absolute drop dead time to do the replacement. But you really want to catch things early.
Our 2010 Subaru Outbacks for reliability.
Well, they're excellent. These are getting near the end of the timing belt era 2.5 liter engines. So along with that timing belt replacement, head gaskets go on these. It's just a kind of part of the design, unfortunately. And it's kind of a cost you have to bear if you own one of these, but they are an excellent vehicle. Pretty predictable. I'd say it's interesting that, and I was talking about wheel bearings earlier. Those are another kind of predictable repair on these vehicles too. We work on so many of them. But, generally things like the transmissions, a four-wheel drive system, pretty much bulletproof. The drive axles are good. It's a good car, and it's a good multi-purpose, useful car if you're going on slight off-roading or, off to the mountains kind of thing, which is why they're so popular around here.
If you're looking for service for your Subaru Outback, or doesn't matter which model, the guys to see in Vancouver are Pawlik Automotive. You can book online at pawlikautomotive.com. They'll call you back. They'll get ready for your appointment, or you can phone and book your appointment, 604-327-7112. You have to book ahead. They're always busy. Pawlik Automotive in Vancouver, BC. Thanks so much for watching and listening. Thank you, Bernie.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for watching.